Hello, this is Emma Burlett, and I am recording my final assignment, my video reflection. Yay! So, okay, my relationship with tech. I was very fortunate to have grown up in a household that had a desktop computer. Now, I mean, at the very beginning, it was the crazy dial-up internet, but I was able to kind of lay down the basis for digital literacy skills by playing educational games on this computer, right? And as I grew up, I used the computer for all kinds of projects with school. So I started to associate the computer, even my phone, with academics and being able to apply that that digital aspect to my learning. In college, I had professors, thankfully, who really stressed the importance of incorporating technology in the classroom. And that was kind of like in a time where districts were starting to go one-to-one in Louisiana. It wasn't necessarily everywhere at the time, but school districts were moving there because that's where the research was telling them to go. So with my mentor teacher, East Baton Rouge Parish was the school district that I did my student teaching with, and my mentor teacher was able to incorporate laptops and digital skills in every day in his lessons. So I had that as a model, and that's kind of where I based my practices off of in my first couple years of teaching, was that I used the laptop every day. And then of course the COVID-19 pandemic hit, and then everyone was forced to use online tools. And so, but I kept with it. This was a trend that I have kept with even after the pandemic. Even though this school that I am working at now, which is a different school than I was working at with the pandemic school years, they have a little bit more, they have a more traditional view of education, but I am still asking my students to pull out their laptops, do something online every single day in class. So my current feelings about tech, even after this course, after most of my courses in this master's program, are that I was scared to think of doing a strictly online course after the pandemic. And now I'm not so scared because I feel like I have a lot of tools at my disposal now. And I have a lot of scholarly articles and theories and best practices that I can incorporate in an online course, and I can still hit all of the students that I need to hit and hit all of the objectives that I need to hit, and still design rigorous activities that students would find meaningful and worth it to do. Some of the theories that I really enjoyed learning about in this class is the task-based learning theory. Even though I'm still a little iffy on it, there are some limitations with that I'll discuss in a minute. But I really like that there are different stages to it. I love like this idea of having a pre-task phase where you're giving students the materials, that they take it, they make their own meaning of it, and then they come to class prepared to discuss it. And I was familiar with Vygotsky, I was familiar with Dewey and Piaget before I came to this course. But looking at constructivism again, I really, really enjoy this idea that learning is an active process, and being able to incorporate those active learning tasks in my instruction, which I had already done, but now I know now I can make the connection that it's constructivism, it's Bruner. But some of the ones that I wasn't aware of, I knew about schemas, but I didn't connect it to Shank. And I didn't know Langer. And I really, really like Langer's mindful learning. And I like these ideas that of social theory, of theory of social learning. I love this idea that collaboration and community is everything. Now, that's not a new concept for me. We've been learning about that since I walked into, maybe not walked into, but you know what I mean, since I logged into my first course in this master's program. But as I continue to take courses in this program, that idea of building community is just so stressed in a lot of these classes, and that is absolutely something that I will be taking forward with me. A couple of other things are these best practices from Betcher and Chad. I have my yellow legal pad here full of notes. So please bear with me. I want to make sure I hit everything I want to hit. But another thing that I didn't even think of, for some reason I do it, I don't think of it, but I just do it, are to develop those workload expectations and vary the kinds of activities that we do, whether it's synchronous or asynchronous, individual, small group, or partner work. Thinking digitally, so giving students options for readings, for resources. I didn't even think to consider those things before reading Better and Chad. So using all of these theories, all of these best practices, even though they are probably more for strictly online or more online than I would typically be doing as an in-person school teacher in a traditional classroom setting, I will still be taking these practices moving forward because the entirety of my course, maybe not the entirety, but the majority of my course materials are online and they are delivered online and they are delivered using an LMS. So another thing with using these theories and best practices, the only problems that I run into are this idea that the students that I teach, a lot of them do not have the time or they do not have the infrastructure to do homework at home. So if I were to do task-based learning, if I were to give them a reading, or if I were to give them a list of vocabulary words and they would have to do these at home, then a lot of my students wouldn't do them and that would kind of throw off the entire process. So, and when I say they don't have time, I mean a lot of my students have to take care of younger siblings. A lot of them have to work jobs and it's not a choice. They have to do them. So for my practice, I usually just do everything in class. I try not to assign homework if I can possibly help it. Most of the time I say if you can't finish it in class, you have to finish it at home. And if they can't finish it at home, well, then they're going to have to catch up sometime else, like during tutorials or something like that, which, as you can kind of tell, is not necessarily the best strategies for getting students to complete their work. But that's some of the limitations that I kind of come up against. And another thing with these considerations, I've always struggled to design and implement curriculum for my students who are emerging bilinguals. Um, and not even just emerging bilinguals, but students who need the material to be more accessible, that they need those accommodated materials. Um, So using these strategies with on-level students is already going to be novel to me, and actually putting them in practice. And then being able to kind of take those materials and modify them in meaningful ways to where these students who just have different abilities can take these assignments and still produce the same level of work as their on-level peers will be challenging for me, and it will take a lot of thought. But that kind of leads me to my next point, which is about backwards design and UDL. I kind of wanted to use that as the bridge before I talk about my unit design because it's a theory, it's a consideration that I wanted to discuss. But so backwards design, I was familiar with this method of lesson planning in my undergraduate program, and I did have to design a unit with using backwards design. However, back then, it was all theory. So I just did things in theory because that's always better than knowing how things go when you actually put them into practice. And so designing the unit course, designing the unit project using backwards design just took forever for me. It just took me a very long time to be able to connect everything, consider everything, but I will use it moving forward, even though it is a complete time suck, because it forced me to evaluate every single choice I was making and make sure that they were all intentional. So, for example, one of the learning goals that I identified for this unit was that students would use textual evidence to support their answers. And I was looking at my project and one of the many revisions that I did on it, and I realized I was like, I didn't have any kind of activity or any kind of assessment about how students use textual evidence. So what I did was I modified one of the assignments that I already created, which was the annotation chart, and I created sentence stems and models. I just added the little bit where it asks students to provide a quote or an event from the text. So I was able to assess that skill and make sure that students knew how to do that because that is a foundational skill for them as they move through this course. Another thing that I really enjoyed using was universal design. So this has been something that I have been interested in learning about for a while, and we haven't really explored it in any of my other courses to date, but I'm very glad we finally took a look at it because it forced me to make sure that my assignments were more accessible and that they were more relatable. So that is something that I struggle with this traditional English survey, British literature, like I struggle to make the material relevant and engaging. So being able to kind of look at the activities that I created for Beowulf, for this unit, I realized like I could slow down and make them more accessible to not only my differently abled students, but my on-level students. So I already mentioned that doing the unit design it just took longer than I thought, and it was more intense than I thought, but I really enjoyed doing it because I was able to kind of take some of these theories that I learned in this course and in the other course. So I incorporated an interactive lecture using the in my unit, where students would listen for 10 minutes and then do a think, pair, share. And then I made sure to include individual, group, and partner activities throughout the unit and being able to kind of take authentic assessments and maybe not inauthentic, but the formative assessment, I believe, is, I don't know if it's necessarily completely authentic. It's more of a traditional kind of quiz, um, but it has students kind of think metacognitively about their learning. So slowing down and being able to kind of incorporate all of these different theories and strategies in one unit, as well as making the activities engaging and relevant to students, and kind of, you know, taking this material that's so difficult and bringing it to their level without sacrificing rigor was interesting to me, and it is something that I will be using in the future. There are a lot of changes I believe I would make to my unit design at this point in time. Um, I mean, we all do reflective practice and we all want to change things as soon as we're done with them. That's just what I do, at least. I was about to say teachers, but then again, I was like, I don't know. It's definitely me. Um, but I'm proud of the work that I did on it. I think that it's definitely a huge step forward from the activities that I had for Beowulf from last year, and I will continue working on it using these concepts and theories and best practices that I learned in your class. So just wanted to say thank you so much. I did enjoy these last 5 weeks, even though things got crazy. And I'm really looking forward to using these concepts in my practice moving forward. Have a wonderful rest of your summer.